everybody sit down and Kurt, limp over to your seat.
Hey, number two, let's go.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Monday, August 27th special study session of the Planning Board. Glenn, could we have the roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Bagnall. Not here. Commissioner Coronado.
Here.
Commissioner Duzan.
Here.
Commissioner Elrod.
Here.
Commissioner Graham.
Here.
Commissioner Metcalf. Here yet. Commissioner Ranville.
Here.
Commissioner Rudnicki.
Present.
And Commissioner Samuelson.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Glenn. Well, we've got an agenda that's focused on the Inspire Littleton process mainly tonight. Are there any things on the agenda anybody would like to change, rearrange, or add? If not, we'll go ahead and Dennis Swain, you can go ahead and take us through what you have.
Great. I'll go ahead and pass these out. These are summaries of what's in the PowerPoint. As you know, we've got another forum tomorrow night, and we wanted to go through this just to see what your actions, things that you think we might add to the presentation, if it makes sense, if there are other arguments we should be making, other information we should be providing. We have time tomorrow to go ahead and try and make some changes to it if necessary, so that's what we're hoping to get. This is just all the different slides, so I think it might help a little bit in terms of kind of referencing back and forth and kind of seeing what we've got here. Fairly similar to what we've had before in terms of how we start off, just introductions, talking about what we had at the June forum where we focused on population and housing. At July, we focused on revenue and employment. And tonight, we're going to be looking at land use. In September, we're going to be pulling it all together and working with you to make sure we're on the right track here. Land use, kind of what is land use? Well, land use is really exactly what it says. It's just how do you use the land? Is it used as a residential property? Is it houses? Is it retail? Is it office, industry, schools, or institutions? Or is it parks and open space? Or is it something else that I haven't put on the list? But it's basically just how is the land currently used. I went through and created my own principles for the presentation. So these are nothing you're going to find anywhere else, and they're very arguable, I'm sure. So you can go ahead and argue with the principles, but they seem to work for tonight at least. The first one is that retail evolves. I've got a little quiz for you, and I've got 7 photos coming up, and I want you to tell me what each of these structures I'm showing you has in common. There are 2 things it has in common. And if you get both of them, we'll give you a free copy of the design guidelines for Okay, here's the first one. The second one.
They're all in Littleton? Oh.
The third one.
They're all black cloud above.
Oh, it was a cloudy day. Fourth one. Fifth one.
The performance.
Sixth one. And seventh one. Okay. So what do all 7 of those buildings have in common? There are 2 things. One of them is fairly simple. The other one may be a little bit harder to get. But we're talking about land use evolving. Yep.
Strip malls.
All in strip malls, true. So 3 things they have in common.
Well, the first one was downtown.
First one's not. It's downtown. It's on Main Street. It's wrong. Okay.
We got the gong right here.
So they're all retail.
Reuse.
No.
They're all retail.
School in there.
There was a school.
There was a school, isn't there? Mm-hmm.
The reuse of retail buildings?
Reuse of retail buildings, more specifically.
Oh, that's a good one.
Land use evolving. The answer, all 7 of these buildings are in Littleton. Mark was right. And all were originally Safeway stores. Talk about land use evolving, and it's just a great example of how land use evolves and why it evolves, I think. Safeway is our test, I think. So.
Can you flip through?
Oh, sure.
Just for fun.
That first one was a Safeway? It's an old downtown Littleton. Casey.
Okay, here we go. First one, downtown.
That was a safe.
That was a Safeway.
Oh, Lord.
It's 20s and 30s, so way back. And there may be more around town that we're not aware of. Given, I wouldn't have known this if I hadn't seen it on the historic register. That's what it's listed as, a Safeway store.
See, we
So.
still need one, is that what he said? That we still need a.
What does Safeway have to say about this?
They're very proud of themselves. So. they think they're very responsive to the market. So yeah.
Well,
So-
two of those buildings are open, they're vacant.
Right. Exactly. That's a problem. This is the Antique Mall.
Yeah, that makes sense.
This one is now a
That's an auto repair.
auto repair. Exactly.
Where is
Yep.
that?
There's a great barbecue place, by the way. Woody's, really good.
Woody's. And it won't.
It's delicious.
And it won't be there long, so hurry, because it's a,
Conditional use permit.
yes, conditional use report. It is good, I ate there myself, I would recommend, yes, I have, so.
What street is it on?
This is Bellevue, just to the left, and Lowell,
Got it.
okay? And actually, if you go back to, if I go back to that one,
It's a trailer.
Is it a trailer?
Yeah, he's making barbecue
sorry,
on a
what?
trailer.
Like right in the corner, like parked in a parking lot.
And it's good.
Smells good.
The old Joanne.
this is the old Joann's, Safeway before that.
Oh.
This one is the school over at Bellevue and Federal.
Green store.
This one is at County Line and Broadway. So, and that became a Casey's, and now it's empty again, so. Fine Furniture. Well, that's the brand. It's a furniture. Yeah, it's closed now, yeah. So here's the new one. So given the fact that we now have 8 Safeway structures in Littleton, I begin to wonder, kind of things, what's the lifespan of this store? We all look at it and think it's going to be there forever, but given the track record, it may not. And so you begin to think, well, what's that mean in terms of why does it change, and when it changes, what do we do? What should replace it when it goes away? Kind of what Jenny was saying. We have a couple of them that are empty. So what happens? Should we have some kind of direction in place for those stores and for those shopping centers that it represent? Why does retail evolve? Well, I think the 7 Safeway stores, the market shifted is what happened. And I think that's fairly obvious when you look at that.
But why does the market shift for Safeway and King Soopers? When they go in, they stay. That's their MO.
Yeah, it is different. And
So
we'll
it's
talk about that a little bit, I
got the
think.
organization as much as demographics changing.
It's organizational. That is their MO. You're right, exactly. That's how they operate. Whereas King Soopers tends to stick around and kind of wait for the competition to go away, or they adjust to the competition in that store itself somehow. So they change the store, they expand it, they change what they're providing, whatever it might be. Safeway experienced competition. So as you know, it's competition with a different type of grocery store, newer, bigger, different type of market. Shift in demand in quantity and quality. What are people looking for? How big are families? Families' size has dropped. So you're looking for different things as your kids age and as you're on your own. Shift in traffic patterns. So the traffic wasn't going by them anymore, or they weren't thinking it was going by them anymore. It was going other places. And anything else, and I think there are other reasons that probably shifted
So
too.
did Safeway provide those answers, or is that what we're?
I made that up. That's correct.
It'd be interesting if we could
Ask them, yeah. And I have worked with them before on other stuff, and they're not terribly responsive to that stuff. But I think when you look at the locations, that's kind of what you assume has happened, probably, and look at where the new stores are and who they're competing against.
If you compare King Soopers and Safeway, do they have a similar number of stores in communities, or does King Soopers have fewer, that maybe they try and hang on to longer?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know.
I think it's the opposite. I think King Soopers is more than, I mean, as I think of our neighborhood.
Yeah. Yeah.
But interesting, King Soopers is shifting now and reacting to Safeway.
Right.
And so, coming back to your comment of quality, I think that was one of the things that Safeway is changing their demographics a little bit.
Right.
And whereas King Soopers kind of was your neighborhood, this is my opinion, it feels like it's your neighborhood store, kind of stays there for a while, it's local. They have had to react in a way that I think was unusual for them, or outside of their norm. For example, the King Soopers at Mineral.
Great. That's a good point.
That was all kind of foods, though. years ago.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then when Cub Foods moved out, they moved in and expanded it and expanded it again. Safeway moved in and the King Soopers to keep up with demand and expand it again.
Right.
I know King Soopers and probably Safeway, probably all the markets have very strict formula as far as how many rooftops within a certain half a mile or mile radius in order to justify the store being there. At Stapleton, they had to have a certain number of rooftops built before they could do a King Soopers, and they're waiting until there's enough to do the next one there.
So this one you've seen before. It's just our household size dropping from 1980 to 2010. So I think that's one factor. Here's the traffic patterns. This is traffic volume. And if you look at where the Safeways were, there was one here. So what we're looking at is traffic count volume. The bigger and darker the square gets, basically the more traffic there is. So
What time frame is that traffic count?
that's daily.
But in the current.
This year, current?
Not
Current,
not
yeah.
20 years ago.
Right, exactly. No, this is current. Yeah, sure is. So this is the current traffic volume. And if they take it over a couple-year period, so they don't take them all at the same time, rotate. But you can kind of see the pretty little traffic volume of what the Safeway was here. And then the traffic volume down county line and down here. Again, we're actually not showing that one. It's not nearly as high as some of the other locations. Broadway versus these larger traffic volumes, where we have this King Soopers here, King Soopers here, Safeway here.
At the mineral one down there, they've got yellow and the orange. Is that yellow on mineral and the orange is on Broadway?
Yeah, I think that's it, Kurt. I think this is mineral west of Broadway and mineral east of Broadway the other way. So, and this is Broadway south of mineral. And then you can say, of course,
Lucent, where the big one is at 470 down there, is that?
yeah, that's 470. It's
actually on 470.
On 470.
On 470 itself, actually. Whereas this is Santa Fe, and then Santa Fe here, as well as up here. So, and then, of course, we have Santa Fe and Bowles in here too. So, significant traffic volumes there. And the new Walmart is right there. Yep, up here. So, you kind of see typically that we do go where there's more traffic, and this has shifted over time a little bit. And the other thing that happens is not just the traffic volume, but just the nature of where people are going, where their trips are going. If you go to Southwest Plaza, you can kind of go to another shop, you can go to Aspen Grove, where you go. So you're on your way, you shift your daily pattern as well, in terms of where you're working, where you're shopping. And as those of you who remember, we talked about this before, but 20 years ago, Santa Fe was not a nice street. It was just not a street you could think of it being on the retail street. And so that's just changed dramatically. And that's changing patterns too. And so when these Safeways were built, this one and this one, there was no Southwest Mall, there was none of the stuff on West Poles, none of the traffic out there, all was there. So there's a total different pattern in terms of where people were going. And I think, if I recall correctly, I think Bellevue was even more open at that point than it is now. We actually went into Beaumar. I think there was, they didn't have the roundabout, and they didn't have the real restrictions that they have at this point. So you had a little bit more sense that maybe that was connecting at some point.
Before you continue,
Sure.
what's the purpose of the previous slide in this conversation? The one about the
Oh,
household size?
One of the things that we've talked about is what are the change in demographics that they would shift. So even a fairly stable neighborhood, in your neighborhood that starts off being fairly young in terms of median age, you probably have younger kids, probably have a larger family size, probably buying more groceries, a different type of groceries. So that's going to, as the neighborhood ages, or the community ages, you're probably going to see a shift in your market. Just in terms of what people are buying, how much they're buying, both quantity as well as product, I think.
Well, in the presentation tonight, you kind of slid over quickly. Well, you didn't,
Oh, okay.
You didn't say anything about it. If you're a guru, what do you think is going to happen in 2020? Is that bar going to start going up again as the aging population moves out?
Well, the aging population, it depends on, our average age is 42. We certainly do have an older group too, the baby boomer group and beyond. Yeah. So some of those will start, I think we'll start missing them. But I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how many people move. Depends on what kind of options we offer, too. I mean, right now, I think that's one of the issues for us is do we have enough options for younger families to move into? And one of the things that I heard repeatedly on Western Welcome Week Parade, people came and said, I wanted to live in Littleton. I couldn't afford it. I couldn't find what I was looking for. And I heard that both from the older demographic who were looking for one-story patio home, as well as younger families that said they couldn't find something here. They moved to Highlands Ranch. They wanted to live in Littleton but couldn't. So I think that product type is one thing we really need to think about as we go forward. Is it possible even for us to provide that? And what role does the city have in that as opposed to just private development? So it may be an ongoing issue. Yeah,
You know, and maybe it's a skewed number, but what's the vacancy rate of properties in Littleton?
For retail.
The skew, I would imagine, would be, well, the owner decided to rent it, so somebody was in there.
Right.
That is driving that up?
Yeah, we are higher. The numbers that we have are really kind of screwy, and I don't trust them completely. We got them from a private firm as well as from downtown retail group. I think generally they're correct, and so I haven't taken all the specific numbers. I've kind of looked at the average. But it looks like we have a higher vacancy rate, a little bit higher than the region, and quite a bit higher than places like downtown Denver, the kind of specialized markets for retail. But we're a little higher than, and our rates are about what the region is. It's fairly similar. That's actually in the presentation farther on here, so we'll get to that too. But if you want to jump ahead, it should be in here. Yeah, there it is. It is, so we're looking at about 7.7%, I think, for Littleton, whereas the region's about 6.8. So we're about, 0.9 of a point higher percentage-wise of vacancy.
But just to be clear, the statement you just made of I wanted to be in Littleton but I couldn't afford it.
Right.
Was it,
That was residential.
To residential.
That was residential.
Not retail.
Correct. Yeah, residential.
Similar look at residential?
In terms of prices, or no, we don't. That's a good idea. Yeah, it's a good thought.
Right,
What
per
is?
square foot on average in Littleton?
Yeah, what the per square foot cost is. It
Might be hard to get.
we could, maybe we could certainly look at average. I mean, we have such a diverse product type. It'd be interesting to see, but that's certainly what we hear anecdotally from brokers too, and people are selling real estate. So realtors are saying that too. That per square foot, our costs are higher than they would anticipate they would be. And it's schools and parks and all those things, whereas you come into a house and you end up having to generally fix it up. It's an older house, and you may have to do some work on it if you want to bring it up to what the current market is. So it's interesting. Jenny is shaking her head. So enough of that, Mark. I'll keep going if you. Okay, so this is the traffic patterns again, and just kind of what we've got currently. And then beyond that, you have to kind of think about it's not just a Littleton issue, because we really do function in a larger region. So as is very much evidenced by the fact that we have a Costco and we have a Super Target in Sheridan just to the north on Santa Fe, and we have retail to the west of us and retail to the southeast of us. And we do function in a larger form than just within city limits. And so the goal, of course, is to import retail dollars rather than just export retail dollars. So you want to bring as much into the region as you possibly can. Our Apple Store is a great importer of retail dollars because it's the only one in this near area. So it works pretty well. The blue lines on there, just at curiosity, that's generally where our Littleton mailing address is. So that's all the greater Littleton, we could call it, I guess. So.
I was at a function Sunday, and this guy was talking about where he lived, and he lived by Littleton Hospital, and it was funny. He said, "I'm in unincorporated Littleton."
I got that.
You mean Centennial?
Yeah, I heard that from somebody too.
They want to be in Littleton so bad. It's unincorporated.
So I think that's unincorporated Littleton. I think,
He was in Centennial.
Oh, he was in Centennial. Oh, really? Oh, funny. Yeah.
He was on the east side.
Okay, that's great. Love it. The other thing, kind of what Andrew was talking about, vacancy rates and retail vacancy, where we are compared to the region. And then I threw downtown Denver in, it's a real anomaly, but the market's fairly good in some places, so 7.7%. But like we said, a lot of those places haven't been filled by other uses. So we have some vacant stores, but we also have shopping centers which now have churches in them, have schools in them, have other things that are not retail and don't bring the return retail is intended to do. So one thing we're looking at is the total square footage of retail space we have in the city and how that compares to the national numbers.
So when it says 7.7%, then does that take into account those other non-retail uses? then?
No, those have been leased, so it's actually higher than that if you think about actual retail vacancy.
So you take the churches out of the equation?
Churches are not even dealt with here, so if they've leased it to a church, it's reduced the vacancy rate.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Yeah, so we consider that leased, no matter who it's leased to, so.
These stats at a regional level, the 1459 of the rate, does a region include Denver?
Yes, it does.
So in essence, what that, if my math is right, that means excluding Denver, the average rate is significantly lower. So we're
Right.
kind of mid-range.
Yeah, I think we're kind of right in, yeah, I would think so too, so. And of course, downtown Denver, I think, is much higher than a lot of Denver retail. So if you go out on any of the commercial strips, Broadway, Colorado, Colfax, any of those, you're going to end up in rates, I think, much closer to ours probably.
And this is per square foot per month?
Correct, yeah.
Is downtown Denver really an apples to apples comparison?
No, not at all. It's totally different. I think because it really is much more, it's more like our Main Street, I think, in terms of especially retail generally, yeah. So it really, no, it's a real anomaly here, I think, in terms of what it is. And it doesn't have, what we're looking for either in terms of large retail, so.
So I guess what point are you trying to make with this graph?
The only point I was trying to make was that there are numbers higher than that kind of throw off the numbers, I think, regionally. So it's kind of what I was thinking, that it does throw off the retail vacancy rate. As a region, it does throw off. So we do have some real extremes in there, too. We probably have areas that are much worse than we are, too. I mean, much higher vacancy rates. So.
And Dennis, we have talked about before about what are we competing against, and we've talked about Highlands Ranch and et cetera. So what might be a better comparison or just another point of reference would be what does Highlands Ranch look like? What does Centennial or, Inglewood? Inglewood would be another really good one, because that's essentially when we're talking about retail, that's what we're competing with when we're trying to get someone into Littleton versus going right on the peripherals.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'll take Denver out. I think it's kind of what I'm hearing, and try and get some others. They're more comparable. That's good.
Yes, and what I hear Karina saying, Sheridan, Englewood, Centennial, to as much as we have for that. Highlands Ranch.
Arvada would be interesting because they're downtown. Somewhat
And
similar to
similar
ours.
history too, yeah.
Okay, good.
Another number that'd be interesting would be square footage per person too of all those communities. So you can kinda
Retail
see
space to
average.
square footage.
Yeah, and Eric actually is developing that for us, which is great. So, and we're doing kind of the same thing. We're looking at what was built as retail. So if it's now a church, if it's now a school, we're counting it as total square footage that was actually built to be retail. Whether it is or not at this point, that's the way it was built, and so we're counting that as the total square footage per person in the
What
city.
I like about that proxy that you just suggested, Glenn, is it gives you just an indication of ratio of retail to household, right?
Yes.
It kind of goes back to, I think, some of your earlier points of how much, I think some of your questions, how much do you want retail to grow or not? It helps to at
How
least,
much can it grow?
yeah.
Right.
And what are the
So-
implications of it too, right? So if you see a city that has a high retail to household ratio,
Right.
what is, in your mind, what does that city feel like versus where you want to live?
Right. And if you look at us compared to other countries, we're unbelievably high. Yeah, I mean, we're 5-6 times per person, what other countries have. So even European countries that you think is, more
If
fluent.
you did want to make a point about downtown Denver, I wouldn't recommend it, but you could also say, what's the density of that area?
Well, that's true too, yeah.
Compared to these other areas.
Sure.
That's the way to look at it.
Yeah. Plus, it's destination and regional. So, but again, I think that the whole thing has to be put in that regional context too. I think even when we look at It is very complicated because,
Stop at our borders.
no, it doesn't, unfortunately. I wish it did. And it would be very simple if we were off by ourselves somewhere. But yeah, it's not. So, because we may be undershopped in Littleton, but overshopped as the immediate region. So if you look at Sheridan and Centennial and all of us together, so IKEA alone, probably is more than anybody needs. Principle 2, evolution can involve a change in location, a change in scale, a change in use, a change in design. So as retail evolves, it could be any of those things. It can move, which is what we were seeing here. It can change in scale, it can get bigger, like the new King Supers that we're seeing. A change in use can actually go from retail to a school to something else, or a different type of retail. It can become lower end retail, more kind of entry-level retail, kind of an incubator almost. And so you have to think about that. Is there a place in the community for low lease rate retail that is kind of startup businesses? And is there advantage to that? So, what do you do with that? And change in design, just to meet the market, basically. It's changed how this works completely. So King Supers, that's the demolition of the King Supers at Bellevue and Federal. So if you haven't been by recently, it's gone. And it was a store that was way out of sync with the current market. It was really unpleasant to go in. It was not a fun place to shop. And yet it had this amazing market around it. And so obviously they've decided they've won, and they're going to make a real statement. They're going to make a much bigger store. They're expanding dramatically. So
Isn't that technically Englewood?
it is absolutely, technically, in reality, Englewood.
Yeah, that was the first King Superstore.
Yep, sure was. Yep.
And
my
they had to wait for Mrs. King to die before the kids would authorize tearing it down.
Right. Yeah, he had a great attachment to it.
So they couldn't tear this down until the...
Mrs. King wouldn't let it go, and she died about 3 years ago.
It's coming back. It's coming back as King Supers.
It's going to be King Supers again, but
So you
the
didn't want
King
to see the additional-
family wouldn't let it go.
They love the old building, the original
Because it
building.
was their baby.
Sentimental.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what got it started, yeah.
Mr. King died in the mid-90s, and then Mrs. King died 5 years ago. And his family authorized this.
What's the location again?
That's Bellevue at Federal, so it's on the northeast corner. So Home Depot is just across the street, basically, and down a little bit.
Englewood?
It's Englewood. It's the east side of that shopping center is in Littleton, where the Taco Bell is. We get Taco Bell, they get King Supers.
I just want to know where Dairy Queen is. Is it Little?
It's in Littleton. Littleton.
Okay.
Dairy Queen is Littleton.
Very
Yes.
good.
It's not. It's still there. Has not gone away. The Chinese restaurant, Glenn's favorite Chinese restaurant's gone.
Yes.
So other things are gone.
Not having driven up there lately, what else has been demolished along with the King
A
Super?
lot of the inline stores. So that were actually there.
Rebuilt, or
That's my understanding, to be rebuilt. Not all, probably, but some.
could have been
Yeah,
size of
Subway,
those.
Little
Right.
Caesars,
Yeah, Little Caesar.
Christian Science Reading Room.
The Taco Bell still there?
Taco Bell is still there. And, Dairy Queen's there.
Oh, the new one, the other
Yeah,
one.
yeah. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, the old Taco Bell is, I think it's still there too. The one out on the street. Yeah. So the question is, what are the best uses for the sites that have been left behind? So as retail moves, as retail shifts, what should be done with those sites? What's the ideal use for them? You've got a neighborhood around them that's still active, still viable. Having a shopping center that's actually kind of down at the heels is not good for the neighborhood. It's not good in terms of what people perceive as the neighborhood. It doesn't feel good. It's probably not good for property values. So there's a real investment, I think, on part of the neighborhood in terms of what happens there, a real interest.
I think if any questions I'd like to see answered more, that would be the one.
Yep.
What do they think is going to happen to these old strip centers, et cetera? What's a reuse and new use for those centers?
Good.
Well, I think you're probably going to be faced with some of
Yeah.
those decisions because
Fairly
there
soon.
are folks looking at repurposing those centers for other uses. And that'll require rezoning, and that'll be before you and all the neighbors and everything else.
And
It's,
they're large sites.
That's where madness here.
Yeah.
So if you could steer the audience a little bit towards responding to that
Right.
particular question. that'd be
Yeah, exactly.
wonderful.
I think so too. And I think we get a little bit more detail in terms of what are those questions you have to ask when you're looking at repurposing those sites. So, but they're large sites. This is not a small site. This is the one out of the county line, and they all are. fairly sizable sites. They tend to be fairly complex sites in terms of other uses that are there, other ownerships. They're not necessarily a single ownership for the whole site. So it gets complex in terms of what do you do with it. And then it gets complex in terms of you've got a neighborhood around it that's primarily single family. You've got a site that you may have to purchase for a sizable amount of money, and then you've got an investment. So you may end up having to put more intensity onto that site just financially than was there before to make sense. And so there's questions, I think, with that in terms of what's the neighborhood willing to do that.
And I think what's also important to convey is how citizens influence industry coming in. So if the city is perceived as, the citizens fight everything, they don't want any kind of development, then you're not getting any buyers. And that's not a good thing either, right? So I think it's important just to convey what influence you as a citizen really do have, and consider what that does or does not do.
Good.
And both in a positive and negative way.
It's kind of lined up with what we're saying here in terms of my third principle, which is communities can either let change happen on its own, or they can help direct that change. Because it's going to occur. We didn't have a whole lot of impact on the Safeways, and we have 8 Safeways later. It's been changing anyway.
What fundamentally changed in the past 5 years that there was a group of people who vehemently fought a Walmart superstore down south of Aspen Grove 5 years ago, but yet now we have a Walmart neighborhood market, which is definitely different.
Sure.
But now all of a sudden it's more welcoming to that kind of development. What fundamentally changed in that 5-year period?
My take on it was that the opposition to the Walmart on Santa Fe was an unusual coalition of interests that you may not see again. You had people who didn't like Walmart generally because of who Walmart is and what they do and how they operate. And then you had people who were just so concerned about the park that type of use adjacent to the park, where you had the loading dock, you had 24-hour operation, you had parking lot and all that stuff. They were just so concerned with the potential impact of that. And then we had an immediate neighborhood that was right there too. So it was a much larger facility than what we saw with the grocery store. The grocery store was actually quite small, going into an existing grocery store. So actually filling a void, one of those vacant stores that rather than sitting there vacant was going to be filled by use. So interesting question, I think, and I don't know that that's the right answer, but it's...
No, you got most of it. I think the change of access was better. It was pretty poor on South Santa Fe. That was a major, but I think the park was numero uno in my mind.
Yeah.
I think it was kind of that perfect storm, that site was a lot more disruptive and very different than what was there, right? So disruptive to the surrounding area. There was a lot of negativity around Walmart just in general during that time. So they were facing a lot of negative press anyway. So I think it was kind of a combination of things that just created the right opportunity for, something like that to, I guess, the citizens succeeded in.
The same kind of
that out.
issues going on though in the old University Hospital site right now.
Absolutely.
People in Denver don't want a Walmart in there, even though that's been made.
Right.
Nothing going on there. But
Exactly.
Don't
Yeah.
avoid there, but they don't want the Walmart.
They don't want the Walmart. And even though they're being told if they don't get that, it's going to stay vacant because nothing can happen. That's what they need financially to make it go. And they won't do the automotive use. They are talking about 24-hour, but they're not going to do the automotive service. So it's a little smaller.
They had a picture in the
Real
paper
urban.
over the weekend where it backs up to a corner and started creating an urban site.
Yeah.
That's walkable.
Was the city active in the recruitment of Walmart neighborhood market? Or was that just market forces?
Market forces. That was just market forces. Because remember, we had another grocery store in there that didn't last very long. It was kind of small Cub Foods kind of operation. And so when that was vacant, Walmart just was looking for sites at that point for all these small neighborhood groceries that they're doing. So they found that one. Yeah, I think somebody was saying, as Craig was saying, that the grocery stores are very specific in terms of what they're looking for rooftops and demographics, and they all know what their market is and who else is there and what they want to do. So,
I'm just reading what you're saying then and then seeing it back into your slide deck. Let change happen on its own, meaning let market forces dictate that,
Right.
or they, meaning the community, and is that implying the community as a whole
Correct.
wanting something, or is that implying a city with a directive creating something?
either. Yeah, I think it's either one. Yeah, I think either way it can work. If the citizens of the community want to help direct that, it's either through city council or on their own or however it might work, whatever the structure of the city is. But yeah, I think it's a combination. I think so. In some cases, I think one of the questions we ask is how active should the city be in that process? And what does that entail if the city gets involved in trying to direct that kind of change? What's that mean? So. Probably the lowest form of activity is kind of providing the information that people need, getting the entitlements as close to being in place as possible. Where you've got the correct zoning for what you want, you've got to make the process as easy as it possibly can be, so somebody can come in quite quickly. They don't have the delay of having to rezone a property, of having to actually consolidate a property if you have a large assemblage someplace. So you try and simplify it to the extent possible and make it known that you've got those properties. So you market a little bit that here's what we've got. So I think that's probably the lowest key that I've seen in terms of what cities do. That goes up from there in terms of different financial tools and other tools that you might have.
And the city can get involved. I guess it comes back to this that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get public input. Mm-hmm. And public input helps guide our policy, right? Which can guide some decisions we make on zoning. So we've talked about, what zoning do we remove from the code? What zoning do we need to add, given how things have changed? So where it may not feel like it's a direct influence, there are steps to, voicing their opinion, giving their direction as citizens can have a downstream impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the reason we do a comp plan is to establish that vision that affects the goals and policies, and then that directs to a clear degree or not where the city envisions its future, and that makes it much easier for, whether it's through marketing or just through ease of approvals, for things to happen the way the vision says they should. So.
It's unwritten yet, but I think our comprehensive plan, the most important piece will be our vision, or with city and citizen input, what to do with those old centers, what to do with the aging strips, the auto dealerships moving out. What happens to that? 9% of the city's stable. What happens to that 10%?
And the city has talked to some of those centers. They talked to both the center where the school is on Bellevue and Federal, and also the King Super site on Bellevue and Federal. They talked to the owners there. They talked to the folks that have the Antique Mart on Broadway. And in every case, there was just something that was so kind of overwhelming. In some cases, it was just the financial structure of the ownership. That either they're in a pretty good situation right now. They don't have the debt that, King Super site, I think maybe this is the case. They didn't have a lot of debt associated with it. It was a good situation. They didn't want to take the risk at that point. The return was good for them. It just depends on where they are in terms of their own tax situation, what they are in terms of tax structure. The one on Broadway was just all these this assemblage of ownerships, some of which were real estate trusts that couldn't let a single property go. It was that kind of stuff. It was just very complex in terms of actually trying to get an assemblage there that would make sense for redevelopment. So. Jenny?
I think what would be interesting as a question, too, is to ask residents, where do you shop for your basic needs during the week? Do you shop in Littleton for those, or do you shop outside of Littleton, and what percentage? So I think it'd be interesting to know, and then if you shop outside of Littleton, what is it that's drawing you to shop outside of Littleton frequently? So I just even think about what I do on a daily basis and where I go to shop, and it's been shifting, and I'm shopping more outside of the city of Littleton, and I don't want to, but stores like Sunflower, Sprouts, I know there's families that go to Costco. There's other stores that are just on the vicinity of the city limits, and it's even interesting in the city, Inspire Littleton, there's been some momentum growing about natural grocers. And so it'd be interesting to ask residents kind of really how much of their household income or on a daily basis is being directed outside the city limits that we're missing.
Good point.
Should we be more direct when we're talking about communities than either? We're really talking about Littleton here. I just wonder, maybe Andrew was going to ask you the same. Who's today, what are we talking about? Should we just say Littleton can either?
Okay. What's everybody's thought?
Talking about some theoretical community out there.
So we could say Littleton can,
Yep.
Well, Littleton meaning the city officials, Littleton meaning the city council, Littleton meaning the people of,
yeah,
who are they? They are the city.
yeah.
Left change out on its own is, I think, directly related to market forces.
I think it's just worth explaining. So when you talk about, I mean, maybe it's just, you can leave the words as is, just talk about what the intent of this.
Okay, just talk about, okay.
Right, there are numerous players in a process, so owners, residents are just one of the influencers of any process through their participation, either support or not.
Okay, good.
Something I think is important with any redevelopment is the visual quality. And I don't know if the city has any identifiable character, architectural style. What is Littleton architecturally? I know
You should
that
read your packet.
that's downtown. I know what downtown is now, but outside of downtown, look at South Clinton. They created a new place. The place is humming, and I think the new Safeway did a pretty good job of redeveloping. They put back a strip center. They didn't do a lifestyle center. Or Aspen Grove is kind of a lifestyle center. If you were more urban, you'd put more of your buildings, on the street front orientation and hide the parking. But we're kind of a hybrid urban, suburban community. But do we have a process or any type of guidelines? Of course, downtown does. When a submittal comes in for redevelopment, do we as a commission or a city get to say what it looks like?
Can I relate a little story? That I got an unpleasant phone call this morning. I'm doing a office remodel, 1973 office, remodeling it, cleaning up the inside, going to re-stucco and clean up the outside, make it a little more appealing. Get the phone call from the city. Gee, you're not meeting our guidelines for remodeling exterior buildings. I haven't experienced that in other communities where, typically it's me and my owner, as long as I meet the building department and zoning regulations, but they have an overlay for visual improvements to the exterior. Fortunately, I was able to argue my way in my building into meeting their standards.
Even if you're not touching the outside?
I'm sorry?
Even if you're not touching the outside?
No, if you're not touching the outside, you can, I could have left the moss rock and the T111 siding and painted it. That was my threat at the beginning of the conversation. What do you want me to do? And she backed off a couple of things. Yeah. But no, so we are touching the outside and, upgrading and changing the style from the 70s to 2012. So then those guidelines kick in. Now, I don't like guidelines as an architect. I want to just do what me and my client want to do. But there they are in Wheat Ridge. And if you haven't been up to Wheat Ridge lately, I haven't been up there in, 15, 20 years. It used to be kind of a ho-hum community. They're open for business. And that community's changing. West 38th, which used to be a mess, is amazingly nice now and rapidly improving.
Actually.
About it.
Yeah.
And you want to mess that up? I love that. No, just kidding.
Yeah, Jenny and I just were at a presentation last week about Wheat Ridge and what they were doing. Was that 38th?
It was 38, yes,
Yeah.
38th Street.
38th, yeah.
And the revitalization. And the interesting point about it is that 14 new businesses opened on that street in 2012. In other words, they invested $250,000 in a pilot project for basically street furniture like planters and pop-up cafes. And so they have, in a year where most businesses are more likely to close, here they are opening 14 new businesses on the street, and then other businesses have been relocating, so they're really getting a lot of synergy.
Where did that money come from?
That's a good question. I know Live Well, Wheat Ridge is,
250,000?
I wonder, I don't know if it's a
They
city.
Right out of their budget.
Is that right out of their budget?
Yeah,
Okay.
because they were mainly street improvements. They restriped and then some of the streetscape stuff. So it was probably in their capital budget.
So again, we asked this question, how does the city get involved? By the city doing those types of things, it creates.
It did create, and they,
a desire or interest to be.
and they developed a whole logo, and they've been doing some events to try to get people
Is it about
downtown.
like 38th and Wadsworth, is that?
It's between Wadsworth and Sheridan.
Yes.
Yes,
Highly recommend going to see it.
yes. Actually, I drove out there
I
and
stumbled
saw
upon
the
that
pop-up
area and I
cafes
fell in
after the on the way out to a hike.
So are we doing we have an economic development office,
We do.
and
We do.
they're gearing up, and
We're actually hiring a new director. They're now in community development, so they have our budget. Taking planning's budget. No, they have a certain amount. Now, do they have money for incentives? No, because we've never done that in the past. So that's why council's going through that whole discussion. How far do we go with economic development? Do we just market the community, or do we have a fund where we land that fish that comes?
But it sounds like they just did streetscaping and some landscaping
And
in
then,
the community. They came, you built it, they will come, or how did that?
often that's it. I think it'd probably be a combination. They probably did some facilitation of the process too. They probably made it a little easier. They may have looked at what's available. So they certainly targeted an area that they thought could redevelop. I mean, that had that potential.
Businesses building new buildings, or were they repurposing other buildings
Seems
there?
like repurposing.
And they also have
Yeah.
like, I did a refacade of a bead store up there. It hasn't been built yet, but there's like, I think, a $3,000 grant that the store would get for part of the construction. So it wasn't too shabby.
Did I read that they also did some street skinning, that they narrowed from
Oh,
two
they did.
lanes?
They did a
to-
road diet.
So that's where they got the space for better sidewalks and street trees?
Yes, yes. And this is a pilot project, so they haven't actually changed the curb. That they've actually just been setting up the planters and these pop-up cafes, and they're mobile, so they can move them where the most activity and the greatest need. To, I guess, for the next 12 to 24 months, and to figure out, see if the community really wants to invest then into the more permanent version of actually changing the curbs to
An
reflect.
article in one of the magazines a few months back, these pop-up areas outside that were just temporary.
Yeah, the Bay Area's been big on them.
exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's what it was.
Repurposing parking spaces.
There's an organization in Denver that's doing that too, called Better Block Denver, down in Jefferson Park. They did one in June, they're doing another one next week, I think, where they take a whole block and they just put temporary cafes, take up the parking spaces and plant it.
Did the ownership, I don't know if you know this, but did the ownership in those Wheat Ridge facilities change and new money came in, bought the facilities and did the improvement? So it attracted new buyers. And the reason I ask is I look at some of these properties, and if the owner's fat and happy and getting enough rent that he's satisfied, or she, whatever, the REIT's satisfied, whoever's satisfied, then what incentive do they have to do this improvement? And that would incent, should those conversations happen, did Wheat Ridge do that helps drive the new development?
Yeah, I would think they would have to. I think they'd have to have a lot of information about those property owners, have talked to them, know what they needed, what they were looking for, in order to do that. So, because if you go into an area where people are, third generation property owner waiting for something else to happen in 5 generations, it's just you're not going to get any movement on it at all. And often you get that change in ownership, and you get a lot more activity coming out of people that have a mortgage and have some
Was the city
motivation.
active in recruiting those new buyers?
I don't know. It's a good question.
Alternate one and alternate two. With
Other than they branded the area and they did a lot of that type of marketing, but reaching out to other buyers, I don't think so. He certainly didn't mention that. Maybe behind the scenes, I don't know.
I know they were.
There's
I've
Probably
heard that
counts on
being
those.
done. I've heard that being done, that cities do go out to certain, actually that happened to a friend of mine, that's fine that they find a type of store or business, and if a city, especially in an area where they're kind of redeveloping or creating a lifestyle type of scenario, they'll go look for the types of businesses that they're looking for, and will ask them to join them.
Yeah, I think a lot of cities do that. I think there's a downside, though. Just again, look back at the evolution. If you attracted Safeway to your city and you gave them some kind of financial incentive, and in 7 years they move, or the United Airlines going to Chicago, and there are lots of kind of horror stories that go with that. But it definitely is a way to look at it too, and maybe provide the kind of activity initially, and then you can plan for the future
in
too.
This scenario, in my scenario, it was about specific small businesses to create an environment. So maybe that is less of a financial investment than trying to entice a big corporate.
Yeah, could be, absolutely.
I think it'd be worthwhile for staff at least to meet with their staff and find out what they're doing, maybe report back to us or the city in general, council. Whatever they're doing on West 38th is working.
It's working.
It is working.
They're doing that. They're doing all that work on Broadway too, so they must be doing the same type of approach. Because they're all the way on Broadway. They're putting medium, or they're putting things in the middle of the road.
Denver's doing it. It's a long, painful process.
It's
been
part
going
of the
for
bond project that was passed when, 10 years ago?
93, I think, or it was way back. Yeah, it's a huge change, but it has such an impact on the property owners as businesses are closed or it's hard to get to. But it's such a huge improvement. It really is. It's a really long-term and directive. They also have a business improvement district in place for most of that area, where they maintain the improvements. The city just does not maintain the streetscape. They don't maintain the lights, the landscaping, the trash collection. It's all done by the property owners along the way, the organizations. So, but, they've done a lot of that. And Englewood's done a great job too, I think, with some of their stuff in downtown. So.
They have
culture.
They have a business improvement district in Englewood?
I don't know if they do or not. It's a good question. I'm not sure. Who does that? Or the city does it?
Was the River Point a business improvement district, or was that just commercial development?
River Point was, I think, a metropolitan district, wasn't it? Did they do it that way? I think so. I'm not sure. But it was some financial arrangements. Kent was involved with that, so invite him back at some point to tell us the story on that one, I think.
Is Broadway a Littleton property, or is that a state highway?
It is now Littleton. It used to be a state highway. That sound right? You're looking, I think, or maybe it's still state. Littleton Boulevard, I know, has been given over. I think maybe it is still state. I don't.
I don't think so, because we're the ones that dictate the sidewalks and everything.
We dictate sidewalks, and Charlie negotiated the repaving, with City Centennial for the section that's split. So it must be us again, because I think we've taken it back. We took Littleton Boulevard back. So I think, we don't have that many left at this point. But I think, as Glenn kind of implied, that sometimes the state standards are pretty hard to meet, and not necessarily urban, in terms of what they want. So the thought was zoning. Zoning is kind of one of the things we can talk about, because it's one of the best tools used by communities to help direct the evolution of land use. So if we're talking about the evolution, we're looking at what are the tools available. Zoning is the common one. It's the most common one. Not necessarily the only one. There are lots of other tools out there, but it's probably one we all think about. And zoning regulates land uses, the minimum lot size, lot width, building setback, percentage open space, maximum height. And in some communities, they've gone so far as to not only do minimum lot size, but maximum lot size, maximum lot width, maximum building setbacks. So they look at both sides in terms of what's really compatible, or they get into form-based zoning where it gets beyond this and gets into very specific requirements for what you're going to build. And they have a lot less interest in what the land use is as opposed to what the form is, what's it look like, with the thought, again, that you're going to get that evolution. So if you have the form that is appropriate for that location, who cares what the use is in there, within a range. But they certainly allow a lot more flexibility for people to come and go with similar parking requirements, and so you don't change every time the use changes, and the building is similar no matter what. So lots of variations on how you do this. This is the kind of the basic one. And this is our zoning map. pretty obvious, I think. This is Santa Fe, this is Broadway, and we have Bellevue, and Mineral coming through here. And you can see that the major part, if yellow is residential, you get darker yellows, you get a little higher density. Red is retail, commercial. Gray is, this is zoning, so it's a little strange. We've got some, South Park is zoned industrial, PDI, office park, and it doesn't allow some other things as well. It's a pretty broad definition of what it can be. Aspen Grove is actually PD, it's industrial as well. So the zoning isn't necessarily a direct correlation to what the use is. So we changed a few of these because we had some that were even farther off. But you do kind of see that there are, and actually we have a new one that changes this as the quarry, which shouldn't be retail, which really is open space. With a new map that we install here. But you do kind of see where the retail uses are. It's pretty much along the major streets, along the corridors.
Where's Ridge? Ridge?
Ridge is right here, I think.
So there's
Ridge.
darker yellows on there?
There aren't very many, no. There are some, like in here. That's downtown, CA.
Should north of Littleton be dark yellow or high density?
Yeah, it should be a little darker yellow, probably.
Because
We were kind of-
it doesn't show up right.
Yeah, we were really generalizing in terms of where the residential
Maybe your
are.
scale is all the same color yellow.
Yeah.
It does, yeah. It is all the same. It does.
Would be nice to see where some of the apartments
That could be a trick question, or that could be your next question. How many yellow do you see?
Yeah, we asked Eric to really generalize, so you just kind of get a sense of where residential is, where open space is, where commercial is, and we're going to go back and change some of these that just don't make sense. Probably need to change this one and this one. Even though it's zone PDI.
It does say simplified zoning up there.
It's simplified, very simplified.
The Marathon site doesn't seem like it should be red.
Yeah, this is Marathon.
It's a mixed use.
It's a mixed use, yes. We'd actually ask Eric to change the back half to residential. Retail in front and residential back behind. And this is, it's a combination of retail and commercial office, because this is office park here. This is primarily office park, which that is too. So it's a real generalized map.
So the good news of this, I mean, coming back to what we talked about, we need to have retail space in the peripherals and high traffic areas, so we do.
We definitely do, yeah. And the city, I think, has had a policy for a long time to try and minimize through traffic. And so the major traffic goes around the residential neighborhood. So we've got very few streets that carry heavy traffic. It's Broadway, Santa Fe, Mineral, Bellevue. As a result, we also have Littleton Boulevard. And so you're going to hear a lot of concerns about Littleton Boulevard and the traffic on Main Street. And what that means, the difficulty is, what are the options? What are the alternatives to that? Because we've kind of put ourselves a bit of a corner in terms of there aren't any alternatives, but the good news is it doesn't go through the neighborhoods. And so the only alternatives left would be to put traffic through some neighborhood someplace. And that's certainly not the way city's been going. It's just, it really,
But
we've
this
been
is
pretty
something
fortunate.
that I think, comes back to everything we've been talking about. From being in the right places, we're there. But we don't have the right things. And maybe that's why our vacancy is so high. And why is it that we don't have the right things? Is it cost? Is it something to do with our demographics? Is it the buildings are old? Is the area not pleasant? And I don't think that's the case for most of our areas. But I think that's then the question. So the question's not about where do you want retail space or not want retail space. I think we have the prime property for retail space.
Mm-hmm.
The question is then what should really be there that you would actually frequent, and then that store would stay populated and rich.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple interesting things about this. For today and for the last 50 years, this makes a lot of sense. You have the high traffic corridors and you have the retail sort of spread along there. I think the trend that we're seeing is toward more concentrated sort of areas that aren't necessarily along a corridor. They may be at an intersection or something like that, but they don't. It's not as dependent on Stretching the corridor, right. Neighborhood-oriented retail. The big hole in the middle there of
If you think back over the past 30 years, which is a reasonable time frame, of what's happened on the south end is Highlands Ranch came in and all of that stuff that developed at Broadway and Highlands Parkway. And also, Southwest Plaza was only built 30 years ago. And so a lot of that retail went to that one location and moved out of the city all around us. And then as the River Point came in, or Riverfront up here, that became the new hub along Santa Fe. But all around us, all of those things have been revitalized in some way. And it's a revitalization. A lot of things have changed. 30 years seems like a long time to some of us.
But it always amazes me if I'm on Mineral and I look to the south, I see Highland Town Center. And from that part of town, that's pretty visible. So one of the questions we thought about asking is just how connected does everybody feel to the rest of Littleton? Because I think if you're northwest where Andrew is, or Randy is, southeast, it's far southeast. And we've even heard, if you're south of the Highline Canal, it's very different just because it's so difficult to get to the north, because you can't get across the canal except Prince and Broadway, basically. So Santa Fe.
We actually have
can't connect.
a north-south movement. Santa Fe is obviously a major corridor, and Broadway is a major corridor. Takes people from Highlands Ranch and gets them up north. We have very difficult east-west movement. Mineral is heavy, but it's kind of a challenge. It's not a straight shot. And then Littleton Boulevard is actually, mentally for me anyway, it's a dead end on two sides.
Right.
You can't get past Littleton High School, and it's a bear to get through downtown. So I avoid it. So that little horizontal east-west corridor on Littleton has been a challenge, and that's the area where we've seen some of the older buildings, less renovation. We're seeing more so down south where you're getting people from Highlands Ranch coming up and utilizing the retail, the commercial, and all that. So there's some movement patterns that are influencing the newer stuff and not the older stuff.
The old Safeway where the Casey's was at Broadway and 470, across the Broadway from there was an Albertsons. Those were both built about the same time. They were built before Highlands Ranch had a grocery store. And as soon as Highlands Ranch got large enough to put their own groceries in, then those centers went away, both the Albertsons and the Safeway. Safeway went first and the Albertsons afterwards. And there's not a grocery down on that corner.
So that
It
says,
didn't bring the traffic back up over.
so that says the people to the north of that weren't coming south to shop. It was the people from the south coming up north. So that's
That
kind
was
of
the
like,
original
right.
reason for building those, and then as soon as they had their own shopping and
Right.
retail in Highlands Ranch,
There wasn't a market. Yeah, the market disappeared. Yeah, absolutely.
I wonder if freeways are real barriers.
Yeah.
And, you
People
know,
don't go crossing the freeway to go shopping.
and people look at Santa Fe that way as well, right? Where they kind of.
I think so.
become-
Between the river and
It
Santa
feels
Fe.
like,
Yeah.
I have to go somewhere it's not local
Right.
to me.
Yeah.
So maybe there's opportunity to just, on the east side of Santa Fe, on the east side. So other developments on the west side of Santa Fe, if it's to serve this middle community, should we be considering retail east of Santa Fe? I don't know that there's spaces for it, but that might be an opportunity to serve that middle.
Next, we have this property in here that should be looked at.
But I think what we're talking about, there's this big space of residential, and they have to travel probably maybe 3 miles to get to anywhere, right? Is that about 3 miles?
Grocery store, certainly. Yeah, there's nothing
At least.
here. So you have to go.
Yeah, if you live in the middle of the yellow, you got to find your way to a store.
But I want a grocery store on Ridge.
We had a woman at the meeting time before last that was real adamant that she thought we needed to open up the traffic on Bridge Road too. So onto Santa Fe. But she thought that'd actually reduce the traffic, but I think it would make it a lot worse. I don't know. Make that connection there. She thought that was going to reduce the traffic.
It was open.
It was open, yeah. They closed it, 20.
I remember
yeah.
being an outsider living in Denver thinking, why the hell doesn't Arapahoe Road go all the way through?
Right.
Why does it stop at Broadway?
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Just keep it going, yeah. The question is, our current zoning as effective as it might be at directing the evolution of land use? Is exactly what you've been talking about. Is it really accomplishing what you think it needs to accomplish? Another one, a couple of questions, actually. Does our current zoning accurately reflect the best land use for each area of the city, the appropriate quantity of each land use, what buildings should look like, kind of what Randy was saying, how tall should they be, what are the other concerns? So does the zoning actually do that in the way that you think is appropriate? I don't know. It's a good question.
Geeky question.
Okay.
No, nothing intended other than,
Okay.
if I'm asking, I think if I'm asking my wife, and I say, what do you think about the zoning of Littleton?
Sure.
If I ask, I'm drinking too much. But if you say, what kind of stores do we want? What kind of development do we want? Do we want big stores, small stores, urban centers, strip malls, boutique shops, retail shops, corporate stores, local shops? I think that's much more homegrown, for lack of another word.
Go back to the last slide, if you would. Yeah. You're speaking again in plannerese and to an audience of what you just said.
Okay.
Where do you want the grocery stores? Where do you want the clothing shops?
Yeah.
What would
Okay.
you like to see?
Okay. This one? So this one you think is a little geeky too?
Well, maybe it's more of a question, where's the regional, where's the community stuff? Where do you think people might walk to, and where would you go to fill up your car with stuff like a Costco? And then you'd almost look at the traffic patterns then. I mean, Santa Fe is certainly a regional corridor. That's where those regional type retailers ought to be. But then Broadway, we see the traffic numbers dropping off. You got a lot of big box car dealers there. Hopefully they stay. They all seem to be reinvesting in their sites. But yeah, I know you've looked at this in the past. Boy, that could change quickly. We haven't really talked about car dealers, but that's mine.
But I think just making it very simple, what do you want?
Okay.
What kind of things are you attracted to?
Okay.
What,
When we have asked that online, I think we should be asking that at the meeting too, in terms of, are we getting what you're looking for? Okay, good. Okay, good.
because they'll be able to answer that question.
Yeah, okay.
The general populace would.
Okay.
I was talking
So what is-
coming in, I would
okay.
like a mountain bike park, and
Sure.
supported with that, I'd like a cool bike shop near.
Uh-huh.
That I can answer the question. What that means in terms of the zoning, I have no idea how to talk
Okay.
to you.
Yeah.
In making that statement, but yet you process your mountain bike park, bike shop, I know what I need to build for
Okay,
that.
yeah.
I think it's a driver to that plannerese answer.
Okay.
Yeah, and maybe said a little differently so that they can think of something. What are things that you shop for outside of Littleton that you would shop for if it were in Littleton?
Good.
You know,
That's a big.
not that we want a Costco in the middle of Littleton, but,
It's huge.
you know, people want the fabric store back.
Right.
So, you know, what are the things that we've lost that you want back? Or that we never had, that you go to Highlands Ranch for?
Men's clothes. Where do you buy men's clothes? In Littleton.
I don't.
Yeah.
Down
right.
a little bit, Austin Huck.
Austin Huck. Periodically. Special occasions. Yes.
Your first two questions.
Austin has, they have beautiful clothes.
Your first two questions need to change to your audience.
Okay.
Those are
But
questions.
hold on, because I think there are more that need to change as well. There are more geeky questions here. So how active should the city be in trying to direct the evolution of land uses? Okay. So,
Use.
okay, yeah. Are there other land use tools that we should be using? So I'll get rid of all of these.
Not gonna know.
And go to, okay, we'll get rid of all those and go to, what, I think that what do you shop for outside of Littleton, what do you do outside of Littleton that you can't do in Littleton? It's a great way to
And I
direct
think
it.
coming back to how do you want the city involved, is I do think that's a valid question. Like, what is their expectation, or what do they believe the city does or should be doing? So they may say, well, I expect the city to provide tax incentives for these businesses that come. Or I expect the city to, create this landscape or streetscape so that it becomes more enticing. So that you may get answers like that.
That's good, yeah, okay.
Well, they may just expect the city to go after retailers.
Right.
Get 'em.
Trader Joe's, yeah.
If we want them, go get them.
Yeah.
Do you know the top 25 retail businesses within a 5-mile radius of right here?
I bet somebody
They
does.
have a map that shows the major retailers.
You mean like a
Mainly
Macy's?
Groceries and.
Like a Macy's?
Bigger box type of.
The question is, where do they shop?
Oh.
And so if they're going outside for grocery stores, well, then that should direct us to say, get grocery stores local. If they're going outside for hobby shops or crafts or electronics or sporting goods, that's the type of businesses that if we're leaving to go get, I think to Jenny's point earlier,
Right.
Then what do we do to attract that kind of development here?
As
It
well
seems like-
as asking the question, what kind of industry? So if we wanted to define an industry for Littleton, maybe find a niche, kind of how the, what was the corridor out to Boulder, kind of develop that new, high-tech, innovative. So is there a niche that we could fill for the state, if not for the region, to say there is a need for this, and how do we cater to that? Kind of what Marathon Oil was years and years ago to us.
Well, to that point, like office space development, I think of downtown Littleton, there's lots of retail shops, but there's not a lot of people going to the retail shops. Because during the day, the people
Upstairs.
who work here are few and far between, because you go somewhere else for work,
Right.
and then you come in for the boutique. Not to dismiss any of the quality of what's there, because I think it's quite good. But yet, if you go there at 3 p.m, it's a rather dead place. And what can we do to incent more office space development in those core areas so that it's not solely dependent on residential, that it has a 24-hour, 18-hour window?
Well, and it's residential as well, I think. How do you get people living there so they're there at night and you get that base, kind of that level of activity. So, yeah, I think it's a combination.
Previous planning commissions have looked at a lot of bringing in housing. I think we've succeeded quite a bit from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But I don't think any planning commission I've been on has talked about how do we bring more office space into the area, where would
I'd
it
go
go?
my business to Littleton if it made sense.
Yeah.
They can commute every day.
And it's got to be the right type of office, too, because we've got, EchoStar's here, the city's here, the county's here, ACC is here with a lot of employees, but none of us seem to get out much or have the expendable income to actually, shop, during the day. I think that you probably needed a more Class A office type stuff.
As a total guess, EchoStar people are more likely to go to McDonald's
Yes.
than they are to come into downtown.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's closer and it's more affordable, and the students, too. The students, there's nothing really on Main
Just
Street.
running across the street.
Right, yeah, exactly. It's scary.
Well, it is,
Yeah, I go to.
They're going to McDonald's.
I think there was some discussion on the website about, we have a major, not a university, community college that has a significant student body. Unfortunately, it's the student body buying power doesn't necessarily jive with the things you buy in downtown. And so, you have all those students, and the students aren't just young out of high school, they're also adult students. And maybe the Economic Development Group could figure out a way to meet with ACC and what do they need in downtown to get the students to hang out downtown?
Right.
Spend money.
No, that's a good point, because, when we're looking at Inspire Littleton, we're, really looking at people that live here, But I just want to make sure we're not excluding other communities, like the student community, right, from ACC, because they, not that, maybe they don't have a vote in what we do because they're not a citizen of Littleton, but they definitely have an influence of what could be some of the drivers of growth for us.
Absolutely. And I think you probably had the same experience I had the Saturday at Western Welcome Week. A third of the people we talked to probably did not live in Littleton, but associated with Littleton. That either had lived here, wanted to live here, lived close, and saw this as their downtown. It's a huge area, and a huge number of people.
So should we open up Inspire Littleton?
Well, it's really the website is. If you look at the zip codes of who's invited in and who's participating, it's probably a third of the people are from outside the city itself. So
What's this that I was wonderfully selected with me and all my other neighbors? This postcard I got saying I've been selected at random to do that. Are we asking these questions?
That's just the survey. Yes.
I didn't get one.
You didn't get one?
Why are you so special?
You were? I don't know. But I was there. All my neighbors did.
All your neighbors
were personally selected, all of us. Get this. My household has been selected at random to participate in an anonymous survey about the city of Littleton. Are we asking these questions in layman terms using this tool as well as we're doing with Inspire Littleton? This is excellent, by the way.
Oh, great. Good. Thank you.
I think it's, and I haven't seen the questions, but they're really geared more towards our current services, and is that what you expect, or are there things we're not hitting as far as the services we provide you as a citizen of the city of Littleton? So are we doing things that you don't use?
Police force, potholes, community safety stuff?
It's a number of things, yeah. And it's going to be utilized then more so we can get our budgeting more in line with what you really demand as a citizen of Littleton. So I think some of it will be transferable.
Done by a consulting firm that's looking at kind of random sample that is selective and does represent the community as a whole. So.
On my mailbox, I see all those laying on the ground. So. I just need an indication. What our response rate.
Interesting. Okay.
I wonder if we should talk about, we're talking a lot about shopping centers. I don't know if there's a way to broaden up. The office would help. But we started to talk about repurposing existing retail centers, and should we delve into that a bit more?
Principle number 4, it's not just retail uses that evolve. So, perfect. Thank you.
Rehearse that.
So I didn't get into this in great detail just because it's a long show already. So just showing you that we've had residential evolution, and we've got lots of sites around. You start thinking about it. They've gone from industrial to residential. Alexan was industrial. Community center to residential on Littleton Boulevard, where Littleton Station is. We've had a lot of evolution of uses. And it's an evolution in scale as well as use. So you really can see it's a change.
At the risk of being completely nitpicky,
Okay.
While I personally would love to own that truck, if we're inspiring Littleton,
New photo without truck.
They brought back the guy with the
That looks like
sign,
a great truck.
I think that's a city truck.
Yeah, maybe. Okay.
yeah, I think your point was to show an old building and
Yeah, absolutely. You bet. You think everybody's going to focus on the lovely truck? Or okay, this could be.
it's fairly prominent.
Okay. Okay, cool. So this is actually looking at residential densities and kind of where there is some residential density. Again, the scale. This time they are a little different. Where you see the darker color, you're starting to see some additional density. So certainly, Riverside Downs and Windermere around behind Woodlawn Shopping Center. There's intense South Park, and there's some long minerals. So you've got different areas around town where there is some intensification of residential use as well.
What is the purpose of this? What's the purpose of this
Just
slide?
to kind of just show the evolution again, that there are places where we've seen an evolution of residential as well, where we're seeing that more intensity? Do you think it has more of a downside than an upside to talk about it? Or?
We saw another map with, yellow and then retail. Why do we need this?
Well, that was a zoning map. This is
Yeah,
really more just what's the use and just looking at residential only in this
Talk about
case.
color then a little bit. It's
Okay.
land.
Okay.
More differences between the densities.
Okay.
I'd actually, I'd actually go, if there's a way to do this, might be a little high-tech for one night, but to say this is where people live,
Uh-huh.
bam, this is
And
where
where they
businesses
shop.
are,
Yeah.
overlay.
Yeah.
And I think that guides both portions of the discussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
From a planning point of view, it's interesting that our highest density is on either side of Littleton Boulevard. But that's also the area that needs the most improvement.
Yep.
Because the buying power is not as great.
Right.
All the buying power is on the south end
Right. Where we have
Low
lower density. Yep.
to support retail, but it happens anyway.
And Littleton Boulevard's a dead-end street, which is,
Right.
that's quite a statement.
Traffic drives retail.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, and Bellevue's a dead-end street, too. I mean, that's the other problem with Bellevue. It's effectively a dead-end street on the west, so.
Yeah.
And I think that's what helped kill those two Safeways, so.
And this is an interesting, to just see the density. It's also interesting to look at, I've started to look at where the larger households are living too, so that they're more likely, the families with the kids or extended, that may have just multiple family members. So that's also interesting because where there's the highest density may not necessarily mean that you've got as many people living in each unit. So you may have more units, but you may not have as many people in those units. So the families, basically 3 or more people per household, also starts to show where the buying power is. And then also where, is it relating to the schools and the other amenities that they'd be using, like the library. And so I've started to overlay, I think I sent that to Glenn and
Okay.
Dennis, but that's also interesting because some of the areas where there's the most families is like Bomar, Trailmark, and then there's an area over kind of by Dry Creek, Broadway. That's another area. The areas that have the least number of families, and it seems like it makes sense because it's actually in that higher density area over by, Riverside, that development. So this, yes, so that area has, and as well as the downtown Littleton has some of the fewest. And even, it's interesting enough, around the library and the museum actually doesn't have one of the higher populations either for families.
There's a lot of retirement communities there, so again, higher density buildings, but occupied by one
So
person.
maybe a population density is better than a building density.
But this is interesting to see too, though. This is interesting to see, like, to compare, because just to see where the larger units or larger structures may be located. Because it's interesting, because even though I think of downtown Littleton as being more dense, it's not, when you look at, it doesn't have any of the hot areas for the red or the orange. So the scale of development,
Yeah. Okay,
so
good.
it's kind of a combination, like the layers of information, that they kind of give us each a piece of the picture.
And those look like those look like where the different apartment buildings or complexes are.
Yeah, this one really is, yeah, so it's true. Yeah, and it's real generalized again, so it doesn't catch all of them, but it gets the concentration.
What is our average overall density, do you know?
Oh, I have known, I don't remember at the moment, yeah. It's pretty low.
Sparse community.
Yeah, we actually looked at that.
Density.
Eric just pulled that up, and I remember what he said, but it is pretty low. I think it's like 4 or 5 per acre, I think, something like that. Maybe less, maybe more in the 3, so.
One of the other conversations, maybe it happened in a previous session, but we do talk about traffic here, and we're assuming or inferring that it's vehicle traffic, but should we also be talking, we've done so much to put in bike paths and bike routes, et cetera, so when we talk about traffic, I do think we should open it up to vehicle, obviously vehicular traffic, pedestrian traffic. We have the light rail. We have bicycle traffic. So it's not about driving to where I want to be, but how can I access it through other means? And I think that's the change that we're obviously promoting, but are we following through? So putting a bike path alone, but a bike path to nowhere isn't following through on what that strategy is, right?
That could be an interesting question too, is in the group, is how do you get to the places that you go to? How often do you bike, or how often do you drive, or walk, or just out of curiosity?
Yeah, and then
see
also,
what modes
how would you rather? So
How would you rather, exactly. If you had an option where there was actually a bike rack and you had a safe bike lane to get you to that location, would you go there more? Or would you use other modes of transportation other than your vehicle if it was designed for it better?
So the principles, again, are retail evolves, evolution can involve a change in location, a change in scale, a change in use, or a change in design. Communities can either let change happen on its own, or they can help direct change. And it's not just retail uses that evolve, but we also see the employment uses, the offices, the residential, all evolving as well. So here are the questions we've asked. What's the lifespan of current uses? What should replace them if they go away? Is our current zoning as effective as it might be at directing the evolution of land uses? Does our current zoning accurately reflect, the best land uses for each use of the city, what buildings should look like and how tall they should be, and how active should this, and I'll change these, active should the city be, and I'll change, that's another we change. And let's see, and there's another page up there too, but I didn't get them all down here, but there are more questions. So the thought was I would leave the questions up so during discussion, because we'll have discussion afterwards.
Direction, if all of those questions could be put in layman's terms.
Okay.
And no more than 3 to 5 tangible words in a
Okay.
sentence.
Okay.
There's an old PowerPoint etiquette point of 3 to 5 bullet, either 3 bullets of 5 words or 5 bullets of 3 words.
Good. Good.
Remember that.
I'll be teaching your class later on. What does it cost? It costs a mountain bike car.
Okay, cool.
One thing I noticed that is lacking from this is the other land uses, open space, which in the Inspire Littleton website, I see a lot of conversation about the quality and access to parks and open space. And so I think what we've been focusing on mostly is the economic development aspects of land use, residential. How do you use land? Whereas there's another aspect of the quality of life. How does certain types of land use impact our quality of life? And I think that goes back to the question about what it looks like too, what the neighborhoods look like, what the streetscapes look like, and how our open spaces function. So I don't think that should be lost in this. Maybe there's a question about that or a slide that identifies parks and open space as a land use.
We did include it on the initial slide that showed the land use flood on the first page. In a discussion there also.
It's interesting, some communities are seeing that as a land use for that shopping center that's not working. Where there isn't the market, they're actually going in and putting in pocket parks in those spaces. Because they do add value then to the neighborhood around it, so you gain some value back, maybe not the retail dollars, but that may spur. And it's a good way of the city to invest in an area as well.
There's a fair amount of data out there. Trust for Public Land has put together quite a bit on the value added by proximity to parks.
Well, and I would think, I have not seen a study on our parks, but we certainly have a wonderful concentration of parks. I mean, just amazing parks. They tend to be on the west side of town. So you go to the east side, we certainly don't have the same intensity of parks or quantity of parks that we have. So I it may be something that's useful to add, think about how we do that.
I remember it came up when they were doing development or the plan redevelopment of Marathon Oil, where there were a number of comments around turning that into soccer fields and things like that. And so, I think it's an important point that Craig's bringing up, because if you create a place where people will congregate, you also naturally create a place where people will spend money, people want to live. So it kind of generates all the things that we're trying to. It's just another tool, another way to get there.
Maybe more than other things, it almost has to be located exceedingly
Yeah.
well. I mean, you really have to think about where the parkland is and how it relates to all those other uses, so we really get all those benefits.
Yeah,
So, I think it absolutely can be wonderfully useful.
In new communities, often a goal is to put some sort of a neighborhood park within a quarter-mile walking radius of any place in town so that you can walk to it. So next item on the agenda is the Mind Mixer report.
Yeah, there weren't enough changes to actually more trees being killed, so I'll just say that we're up to 458 people, I think, at this point, which is great. So, we were at 449, I think, when we sent this out. So, we've had more conversation. We have a few of the people we signed up, we still can't read their email addresses, but we did pretty well, Jeff, I think, with most of those folks. So Mind Mixer's been working on it. We're sending stuff, guesses back and forth on what it might be. But I think it's going well. We talked about adding some additional questions, and we talked last time about bringing possible questions here. So here's some possible questions. When I think about adding them.
Have you seen a spike since the Western Welcome Week booth? It seemed like there were a lot of people.
Last time we did that, it took a while to get this back. It did come, but it was kind of gradual, actually. Yeah. We also have an event tomorrow night. We hope to get more people signing up tomorrow night. We sent out, did you ever get one of these?
Yeah.
Good. So we sent out 26,000 of these. So.
Much better than the little picket fence.
Is this better? Okay.
Yeah.
This is getting warmer. A little bit.
Who are those people?
No, yeah, Chris did a great job. I think, so appreciate it. And we try to use fewer words, so still a little wordy, but we try to get as low as possible where we are. Kind of using the Apple model in terms of white space and gray type. That kind of stuff.
Can you see direct correlation between where you sent the flyer and the amount of enrollments in that zip code or territory?
We sent it citywide. They were distributed to everybody that we had, as well as much important point that we still have the majority of our people in 80120, and that's where the increase has been the last few days as well, primarily, and then some beyond that. We tend to add, if you look at the list of zip codes and where they are, it's fairly impressive in terms of how broad distribution is. But I think some of them are actually interested in Littleton. They may be property owners. They may have some interest other than just curiosity about the website as well. So.
What do you attribute the spike, 12 people in 80122 and 21 people in 80123 within a 2-week period?
I don't know. Yeah, we don't know what that is. We had more outreach, so it could be that. 80120 is spike after Goddard. Or excuse me, after Euclid, yeah, after Euclid. So I think we saw a spike after that. Unfortunately, and hopefully we'll see a spike in the Goddard zip code after Florida too. So,
Most impressive is 14 to 17, went from 1 to 11.
yeah.
Any reason for that?
I don't know. No, I don't know what that is. I was curious about myself.
Nice to have the younger folks responding.
Yeah, absolutely. We did have a good turnout of younger people at Carousel of Music. And so we made a little effort to sign up the cheerleaders who were there for your high school. And
Should have recruited them to the sub.
we should have. They were very energetic.
Do you have a rule about that too?
So, yeah, we had cheerleaders. And we had quite a few young people at that meeting that were helping, and so they were signing up as well. And so I think that was probably the spike.
Tomorrow at Goddard, you know how we had the sign-up sheets for Western Welcome Week? Do you have those for tomorrow as well?
True, yeah, absolutely. And it's been pretty effective. People seem to be pretty willing to do that. I always have amazed, but I think it's like everybody's experiencing very soon. people seem to
I
know.
think when you explain it to them, what it
Yeah.
is and what it's not, even
Right.
even more importantly, what it is
It's
not,
exactly.
then they're willing to at least give their information on whether they act on it or not.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
that comes later, but. So actually, I have a question then. When the email does go out to you that says, here's your password, is there information on there to say, this is what it is, this is why we want to hear from you, so there's that marketing, not marketing, but at least communication of what.
Well, communication there, and there's at the website itself. My concern is that a lot of that, I don't know if it's going to get through their security. Yeah, it may get spam, and so they may never
Who's
see
it going
unless
out
they check
from?
their junk.
Who's it going out from? Is it going out from the city?
Those are mine.
So they see Mind Mixer as an email?
Right.
Is there a way that we can send it out, the city? Because if,
I don't think there is, because we don't have all the information. It's kind of, we only, they're very careful about it, even us, they don't give us all the information that they have, so.
Can't send it out with a link to my mixer?
Yeah, it goes to the link to my mixer, so the way they send it.
Oh.
but think about if you get an email, so I'm telling people, okay, City of Littleton is doing this, but then they get an email that has an address, Mind Mixer, they're like, what is this?
They may never,
That's
they
not,
may never see it. Yeah.
and there's no way that we can send it from a different email?
I'll ask them, let's see, I don't go through it, but
If-
what we've just talked about so far doesn't sound like it.
If not, then at least on that sign-up sheet, we should put on there, this is an email that's going to come from Mind Mixer and approved vendor for the City of Littleton, so
Yeah,
at least they hear it, maybe they'll remember it.
yeah, good idea.
And I read through the questions real quickly here, and they seem to be good ones. I think that they probably should be scrubbed again with respect to the planeries and some of them, the density and circulation system may be hard for people to follow.
We usually try and use every man in every case, we try to, you get caught up in it. Anything that's kind of striking fancy in particular that we think we should be asking?
Well, just those two popped out at me, density and circulation system.
Even number two, I don't know, how many different housing options.
Okay. What type of housing would you like to see?
Yeah, what types of housing be easy?
Yes,
We've asked something very similar to that, yeah. We haven't asked that specifically, but we've asked, different age group by age group, just online, so. Some of this, with different folks being on there, toy with the idea of repeating questions a little bit too. We haven't yet.
Some of them just are painfully long.
Number 7 is a little complicated.
And
Are you talking about tax revenue or?
I think it's a good question.
It's a good question, yeah, but maybe it's longer than it needs to be.
Okay.
I don't understand, I wouldn't know how to answer things. I didn't realize we had a,
Yeah, people don't understand annexation.
I think I know what that means. That means unincorporated and becoming centennial.
We're reaching out to
What do they write newspapers for, like a sixth grade, eighth grade reading level?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would use that as the model here to say, if you were to ask an eighth grader this question, would they be able to answer it?
Yeah, no, we will rewrite those again. We've got 3 English majors who edit me, so. Kathy, Chris, and Kelly.
Yeah, a different approach for annexation is, should the city Number 6 should be more like, should the city have been more aggressive in expanding the boundaries of the city or acquiring more land? I'm not sure what the question is leading to. What are you trying to find out?
Yeah, I don't know either.
Because we're not going to be annexing.
options or.
We're kind of limited at this point,
Yeah.
It's
kind of
kind
a
of
new
branch
point.
that is struck down.
Is there anything to get that?
So of these questions, which ones, can you give me numbers you think that we should be going toward early?
Like 1, 4, 7, 8.
Yeah, eight's good.
Number 8, okay.
Absolutely.
Was 12 supposed to be in the form of a question, like?
No, it's more, it's kind of, I noticed that this is what we're thinking about doing. One of the people who's real active on the site said, go to Golden and take photos and do some kind of voting in terms of, would you support something like this in Littleton. I think particularly what they've done downtown, doing some really nice projects. Yeah, mixed use, Starbucks, April off the Starbucks at the ground floors.
I actually have some good photos from Golden.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh. So of all.
You can send?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good.
Good.
8 and 9 seem like the same question.
Okay.
The one's redevelopment, one's new uses. I think it's asking the same question.
Maybe combine it, 3 more words or something.
I like 11 too.
11, okay.
But you like 11?
Complicated.
2 is.
It is hard to
It is-
read,
it's
but
hard to
there's a
read.
good question in there.
Choose one, sorry.
It's a good question in there somewhere.
You see it?
2 seems like a well-worded, easy to understand question. Except you say other, but yet you didn't refer to what other.
Right.
There's nothing to contrast it.
Right, and I think what Glenn was saying, it maybe be simplified too.
We have the housing is.
Is noise even relevant?
Well, it's one that I think Randy brought up. And he was, if I'm understanding correctly, he was talking about traffic congestion and noise as being an issue within a tree. I should be asking about.
I did?
One of the previous meetings. So,
Last week or whatever.
but that's why it was in there actually. Was that,
I don't, personally, I don't know how noise issues fit into a comp plan, but
okay, great. But I guess we were talking about traffic congestion too, and I think we're talking about noise as an offset of that.
yeah, traffic does. But
Well, if that's your question, then just say, are you bothered by traffic noise? And I think you'll get the people who live next to the major corridor say yes, and then you'll get the people who live in say no.
Well, I think what Randy was talking about was just congestion in general, right?
I think
What happens on Main
just
Street,
congestion.
yeah.
The only noise I know of is the railroad tracks, in terms of what people don't like.
One of the things I love about Littleton.
Really?
Yeah.
You live by the railroad tracks?
No, but it just feels like, small town.
It does, you can hear the whistle and all that stuff. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So we only have about 15 minutes left. It doesn't look like we're going to get through the entire agenda, but this has been a really good discussion, so I don't want to sidetrack it. Do we want to move on to the next agenda item, or, because I think that's sort of the capstone that we're talking about, the September form, and how we transition from the public input process to the development of the plan. And so we've got September 25th, which is kind of an open date right now. There's not an agenda for that. Not sure.
Yeah, as you can see, it's in very small writing. You really got to look for it down there. And there is not a council forum that's part of it. I was just mentioning, Craig, I'm not really sure how we ended up with one more date, September. But we had, one thing Craig asked for is perhaps couldn't we use this meeting tonight to look at some of those things, and we do have an intern who's kind of grouping those ideas for Mind Mixer into some overall themes, if you will. And we'd really like to use the Planning Commission to kind of show you what those are. We weren't able to do it tonight, but we hope to on September 10th show you what those are, so we can kind of get an idea of what we think are going to be some of those major topic areas for the comprehensive plan. And that's what I think we could use at, whether it's end of September, beginning of October, we could use that date as kind of, here's what we've heard, and at least to that group is, do you think these are truths? Do you think we're headed in the right direction? I don't know that we have to be wedded to September 25th. Because we're not tied to, we're right here at City Hall, we're not really tied to a district meeting or a city council meeting. Perhaps we use a couple of planning commission meetings to identify what those trends are and really get a good idea of how we do that capstone, if you will, last meeting before we get into drafting something and then re-engaging the public when we have something to show them of what we think we heard and what we think the answers are.
So, and then I floated the idea of a retreat, a planning commission retreat, which we have had in past years, usually during the spring, but it doesn't really matter when it is. but where you have a focused, day, 6, 8 hours, Saturday, lunch, maybe some speakers, but we could also share all that. There's a lot of information coming in, revisit that, and then maybe start to help transition that into those big policy goals and the sort of guiding principles of the comp plan, if that's the appropriate time to do that.
Would that be like a true working session? Or is that what the intent of the retreat would be?
Could be a full day.
Could be half a day is maybe one of these case studies on one of these other communities, and then half of it is kind of crunching what we've heard in the past 4 meetings. And maybe we don't necessarily need September 10th. I don't know that we have any current case coming up. So maybe we do the retreat sooner versus later.
Question on the September 25th, hasn't been gone out on all of these mailings? Isn't that date been set?
Yeah, well, when we did that actual picture, we sent that out early, but I don't know that we've repeated it in any of our later.
It's on the website, and it's been on, in the, I think, the Littleton reports.
I would just be concerned that somebody show up on that night and we're not here.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's, I think
They
that's.
have put that one down on their calendars.
Right, exactly. And we can try and offset that if there's a feeling that's strong enough that it'd be worth finding another date when you've had the retreat and you really feel very comfortable that you've got something really to report back to the public in terms of here's what we see as the first take on the vision statement and maybe some goals.
As I understood it when that date was first out there, and maybe this was just my impression, was that the idea was to go to various geographic locations around the city and then having that sort of final one centrally located that addresses the issues of the entire city instead of the specific parts.
Well, possibly, but I think we really haven't addressed issues that are specific to areas. We've really been doing citywide stuff each time we've had county boards. I think there's always that feeling that's what has been done traditionally, so I think a lot of people expected that. We really been trying to do citywide, so it's been kind of open in our minds, I think, in terms of what that might be.
Do you find the audience that's been showing up, I know it's changed throughout, but are they more from that local
They've been
neighborhood?
pretty geographic so far, yeah, absolutely. So, I think that may start changing. I think with this meeting, we may capture some people from the other neighborhoods that will repeat. I think there's enough interest in the last one in particular, so it'll be interesting to see what we can get. Yeah, it's been pretty geographic.
Can I get a general sense from the commissioners, board members, I guess, whether or not we should, or you guys are willing to do a day-long retreat? When it should be after the capstone? Do we need time to clear our schedules?
Now, that meeting to do it. I mean, if anybody's going to the September 15th workshop.
And has anybody signed up for the AV conference?
When is that? Is that
October,
Is that-
it's October, the first week.
First
So
week of
like
October?
second, third, fourth, fifth.
American Planning Association.
Third, fourth,
State
fifth,
conference.
sixth.
Well, maybe it just makes more sense that we stay on track for September 10th. We show you as much as we can show you, and then we formulate how we present that on the 25th, right here.
And the 25th, again, just to understand what we're trying to accomplish with that meeting is a summary of what we heard. And who do we think our audience is going to be? What kind of, are we looking for a particular audience, or it's kind of an open
It's open. I think we
invite like these
we
items?
have we got the names of the top 20 participants on the website from mine. Make sure they give us those email addresses, so we can target those. Then we can also advertise on the website, so we can try to encourage them to come to that. It'll be
That's exactly where I was heading.
yeah. So it'll be what we heard online as opposed to what we heard in person. So.
And why just the top 20? Sometimes maybe that person that's not as active may have more to say in an open forum like that than they do online.
Yeah.
Especially if we can target them through email, which is cheap.
Right.
It's not a cost.
Yeah. But we talked to them and see they weren't very complicated to see which one it is.
Well, and I would say we want every single idea that's out there, whether it's popular or not.
Sure.
Put them all on the table and then let's figure that out.
To the degree we can't, I mean, there's so many ideas that you can't, there's no way for you to ever comprehend all of them without some kind of consolidation. And so that's what, interns and Craig Fisher at UCB graduate program down there, he started doing that. It's a major task, but there are hundreds and hundreds of ideas, and you start doing an idea board. It's phenomenal how many pieces there are. A lot of them so it's fairly easy to consolidate and come up with some themes, but an awful lot out there. You have to read through them and kind of tear them apart because they may belong to 2 or 3 different things. But I think if we would provide every idea, I don't know. I mean, I think at some point we have a record of that. We'll have a record of every
Keep them
idea.
at least.
Right, absolutely. Yeah.
I'd be very interested in synthesizing all the ideas, because my main question is how do we take all these ideas and fit them into the comp plan that we already have, and how does it influence an update? So typically I need to revisit the comp plan we have, but there's transportation, employment, housing, open space, major categories in the comp plan. That could be a starting point of, is it a transportation issue, question, idea? Is it an employment idea? Because ultimately, those policies and goals have to influence those areas, which ultimately influence a future land use plan, is how I see it. And how are we going to get from ideas to plan? Now, we physically going to take the city zoning map and begin to say, okay, this area here really needs to change to a different zone, or this area here, or how do we influence that map ultimately, and who's going to do it?
I think we're thinking in the first iteration, at least, what we're talking about now is more on the 30,000 foot level, where we do the vision and the goals citywide, and then get into that later, I think, just because it is complex. It's going to take a lot more work to do. What's that mean in terms of our zoning?
Yeah, we need to start, over time, getting
Absolutely.
tighter and tighter.
I have an outline, actually we just went through this planning process where I work, and it just provided some guidance on structure to how do you get all, starting with the brainstorming, et cetera, but then how do you synthesize that? And it really tied into, what are the key themes? So if our key themes are going to be transportation, land use, et cetera, then how do you help bring it together? So I can send that to you guys, just the definitions and words to use around goals and strategies and tactics, and how to identify what is an idea that's really a tactic versus an idea that's a strategy. And
Yeah, and I think one of the major drivers for me is how do you make it readable and interesting, and when you start
actionable.
That's what I mean. And when you start breaking the city apart into transportation systems or open space, you lose kind of how it all comes together and makes a great community. So I don't know the answer yet, but that's what I'm hoping when we start looking at these ideas. I think some themes will emerge that will hit transportation, open space, and how all those things interact. And this, looking at council's goals, very simple, straightforward format, that might work, where it's simply a goal and some objectives underneath it. And pointing out some areas where we need to look at how you refashion Littleton Boulevard to take advantage of the density that's there and the lack of traffic. What starts happening in those corridors. So Haven't got there yet. I think it'll start to form as we start seeing all the brainstorming, because that's really what we've done all summer long. You're right. It's when you sit in the meeting and start throwing out ideas. And that's all we've done, and we kind of wanted to keep it that way. Towards the end, we started focusing a little bit in talking about some of the challenges of just our demographics changing and what that means. But
It's almost like planning poetry.
it's haiku. Yes.
Haiku. Yeah. Simplify it to essence.
It might help us to understand if you update the timeline, maybe for the next meeting, the September 10th meeting, or even 24th, where we understand when we need to plug in terms of making that transition from what we've heard to establishing the goals, the vision goals, and then when we'll start needing to drill down. I don't know if you have that yet. I know we saw one initially.
We've got this thing. I think you've all seen this series. Okay, yeah. So we can certainly look at it. It's 3 pages already, but I think you're absolutely right. I think we need to think about the roles of the planning commission get involved. What do we all do with staff and board? So, are we officially a board at this point? As of Tuesday?
Yeah. Actually, technically, no, because it's just been council's first reading.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you know that, but there's a committee on boards and commissions, and they recommended a number of changes to all the boards and commissions. One of them being the planning commission shall become the planning board. So you will become board members quickly.
What's the legal difference? What's the legal difference between a board member and a commission member?
I think as they started looking at all of them, the only commissions were those that were, I think, identified in the original charter. So the licensing or the elections commission was one of them. I'm not sure what the other examples were. So they're really trying to categorize. Then the quasi-judicial are like the Board of Appeals. It's similar to what your function is. You make recommendations on some things, but you finally approve some things as well. So you become a board. I wasn't in on the meetings, but that was the thinking. Your pay will double like that.
Does it have any substantive impact of what we do?
No.
It didn't, and we got that letter and it said, it had like one line for us.
It just seems like the other cities are all commissions. I mean, even this is planning commissioners workshop, so I don't know if there's any other planning boards in this area, but maybe we'll start a new trend.
You can't go there.
Actually, I think Denver the planning board.
Is it?
I think that's unusual. Yeah. Aren't many others.
Okay.
Quick, just in case you're looking at dates, I looked at my schedule and I have something on every Saturday in September and
Okay. Yeah, I don't think it would happen till after that anyway, and perhaps we wait till after the 10th when we start to summarize that and then decide whether we want to have that day-long retreat. Maybe it's late October or early November or something like that.
Yeah, I think a retreat's a good idea, but maybe when we have more substance to kind of.
Yeah, the timing has to be right, for sure. Yeah, and we need some time to plan it and get speakers invited or whatever.
For me, it's all about the calendar. If we can put it on a date that I can tell you can do it, the answer is yes.
Okay.
Otherwise, that date will fail.
All right. We had the historic preservation design guidelines. I don't know if there's anything specific.
That's right. That's what we were going to bring on September 10th. Right now, that's about it. And as you know, the planning board is the one who does the final approval of all design guidelines. So, in fact, I don't want to steal what Dennis was going to introduce.
No, that's great. I wasn't going to say much at all. The fact that we will have a thorough presentation on the 10th. The Historic Preservation Board did a lot of work on this, working with the consultant board when they were out older. And I think very supportive of what they've got. They have adopted it, for their use, waiting upon, legal adoption by planning commission.
What are we approving?
What we're approving is this document, And we currently have a Littleton downtown design standards guidelines. And what this does, this will become a chapter and will apply only to structures which are in the Main Street Historic District and are contributing structures designated as determined to be contributing structures within the district, or individual landmarks that are outside of the district but within the larger downtown. So this applies to those. This applies to everything else.
So not being an architect or a historic designer in any way, shape, or form, what would I be looking to improve about this? That it's in conformance with the vision of the city, the comp plan, the design guidelines?
Yeah, I would think that probably the criteria is this consistent with the plan. I think it kind of goes back to everything. Is this consistent with the languages in the comprehensive plan and how we should treat downtown, what's in the downtown plan. There's fairly specific guidance in that talks about developing these and why. And so you might look at that language in the downtown plan and just see if this accomplishes that. So,
It's not just specific to those properties that have opted into.
it is specific to those which have opted in and are also determined to be contributing as opposed to
So, and the determination by
initially by Historic Preservation Board, we have a list, and then after that, it comes in, will be determined by the Director of Community Development. So as part of the applications.
I think what would be helpful is, considering this is what HPB is going to use, and they're not all architects and designers, they're citizens as well. So does it make sense to you? Do you think you could actually apply it to a project that's sitting in front of you? That, I think, would be very helpful to get your input on that.
the property owners have had input on this.
We had a series of public meetings. This actually is one of the things that came out of those focus group meetings they had, where they had the, I can't think of what they call true grit meetings. And one of the things that was suggested for the work group was to do this. And it's been something that they felt a great need for. This is really lacking. The design guidelines we have are designed for new construction. They're not designed for historic structures. And so it gets you partway there, but it's certainly not as detailed as
There's
this.
significant buy-in by the property owners.
Yeah, and so it's been very positive. So I think it simplifies the process, makes it a little bit more predictable for them. The fact that the Historic Preservation Board staff now have guidelines to follow instead of very general nationwide guidelines that they can follow, we've been following for a long time. So
If we're asked to approve this, will they have an opportunity to speak? Any property owners?
yeah,
Have
absolutely.
they been invited to
They've not been invited specifically, no. They were invited to the Historic Preservation Board meeting, I think, where they was, yeah.
A number of workshops too, right?
Number of workshops,
Yeah, I attended a couple of them.
Yeah, early, they kind of broke it down in terms of, they stopped early on in terms of the process and went to public, to say, are we on the right track? That's kind of discussion they've been having. Didn't have a huge turnout in any of those meetings for the public. Different.
Nice
I think it might
document.
be-
It's a nice document. I got about a third of the way through it.
Oh, good.
I think it's well done.
And I think, again, one thing's the other, right, if you feel like it's understandable or something that, because a large part of the Historic Preservation Board are lay people, right? They're people who are not architects or historic preservationists.
Craig, whatever became of the meeting that we had, I'm going to tell you it was in June, when Mark and I went and sat with Bill Hopping and I think her name was Nancy.
Marty.
Mark, okay, close. Whatever became of that, which and the point being the actionable part of having a historical preservation designation. It didn't seem to move since that meeting.
Right, and the purpose of that meeting was, what are those additional incentives to entice people to opt in to the Main Street Historic District?
Does that belong anywhere in here?
Not really. No, it's not really related. Now, from that, one of the action items was, let's meet with some of the owners who have agreed and not agreed to opt in. And I think we're at the point of creating some marketing material to lead that discussion. So that's where we are. And I'm looking at Mark because I
Pamphlet have any value at all to anybody? Double mock-up?
Oh, absolutely. We met with Margie, and we met with Margie.
Good, yeah.
Okay, so you've seen a draft because I have not seen it so far.
Yeah, we saw a draft, I just wondered, are you wrong? Yes.
All right.
And we talked to Marty, and we're doing some work on it as well, so we're going to,
Yeah.
kind of take
And it'll come back to our group.
Put it back to the group.
It's a little, that folding pamphlet we talked about doing, and I roughed something out before vacation. Been talking to Margie and got her input. And if it's anything like the quality of this, it'll be really nice to have. Great photos here, well organized. So this should be a guide for the little
very
pamphlet.
happy with that, yeah, absolutely.
Do we have a chance to go over this at all before the official board meeting where we approve it or disapprove it?
I think we were supposed to do that tonight.
Well, that's what we were hoping tonight.
Okay.
How late do you want to stay?
We're done. No, I just.
Can we send you a question for?
Please.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you'd like to give us your ideas, before, we can do that.
Okay. Really just minor stuff. General, I mentioned to Dennis, I was real happy. I expected to hate it or to be bored with it, fall asleep.
We expected you to
It's
hate
about
it.
setting low expectations.
Yeah, low expectations with a lot of critical misspellings and confusing text. It was well organized. It was well done. Actually, I learned some things, and I enjoyed reading it. I read it.
Great.
Read it stem to stern.
I have a related question. I saw a banner on one of the buildings, I think it's Vito's what used to be Vito's Shoe Shop, that they did a remodel and it won an award or recognition.
It's actually the print shop across the
Oh,
street.
that was the print shop?
It's a print shop across the street.
Oh my God,
They
that's
did an
completely
amazing
different.
job. They did an absolutely amazing job.
It
yeah.
did.
No, not the print shop, it's the engineering office, I'm sorry. One of those places.
The Hendricks
Engineering
area.
office, yeah. So,
Oh, okay.
but they did an amazing job. It went from a very kind of 1940s, 50s front that was nice, but it didn't fit with the rest of the Main Street. Went back to the original and did a recreation of it with real high-end materials and really good design. And they started, Littleton Inc. is the one that gave them that award, so.
The auto repair place at the end of the street there. Here. Boy, it's interesting to peel back there, what it's revealing.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's going to be fun.
Really fun.
Boy, is that an improvement already.
You
Are
know,
they peeling it back now? I haven't noticed that.
Yeah, the stuck, getting rid
Taking
of
the paint
guy
off
or
the-
stucco, whatever it is. The brick's exposed, right?
So-
Needs work.
are they, because I was actually, as I was reading this, in that particular, the car repair, or the auto body shop,
Stables and.
it's not considered historic. I didn't see it on the zoning map here. And so are they looking to apply for
not
historic?
in the
One
district.
of them is contributing, one is not contributing. They're both in the district at this point. One of them is not because the damage has been done to it, basically. The thought with contributing, non-contributing is that you can make a non-contributing contributing by doing what was done and with the one that has the ban on it. Which, that major renovation, we go back to something that's original renovation. Yeah.
So we entertain a motion to adjourn. Second? All in favor?
Thank you.